Hello, dear friends. Jordan Rich here, along with, of course, Ken Gloss, the proprietor of the fabulous Brattle Bookshop in Boston. It's a bookshop that has been part of our Boston history, part of the nation's history, I think. And Ken is here to share with us more stories. And it's actually just about the holiday season, so this one is appropriate. We're going to be talking about the Flying Santa, a particular Santa in this case.
Quite a character Santa in this case. There was a customer friend of my father named Edward Rowe Snow. Now, those of you who are from the New England area, like the seacoast, and are old enough to know he was a character. He wrote wonderful books about Boston Harbor, about the New England coast. And he was, although they were sort of history, they definitely were the tall tales and legends. A lot of the romance of the coast, buried treasures, ships, whether they were all true, not true, they at least had the kernel of truth in them. His best book was actually one called The Islands of Boston Harbor, where he did go through the whole history of all the islands in Boston Harbor. And he used to have tours of, you go out on a boat with him and he'd tell you about this person, that person, the lighthouses and so on. But what he also did every Christmas, he would hire a pilot, hire a plane, and he would make up gift bundles, literally bundles, and fly to all of the lighthouses along the New England coast that he could get to, and especially the very isolated ones, because living, and they used to have lighthouse keepers. They weren't electronically done. So they'd be out on a rock somewhere, essentially a tiny island, and he would fly over and drop Christmas presents out. The Flying Santa. Now,
And he did it for many decades, didn't he, Ken?
he did it from about 1936 until the 1980. So what's that, 44 years? But one of the things he really liked the lighthouse keepers to get, because he felt they'd have plenty of time to read, is books. And what he used to do was come to my father and say, will you donate the books for the lighthouse keepers? My father did it every year. Well, not since the 30s, but my father knew him probably starting in the 60s. So the last 20 years used to get him all sorts of books, and Snow would then drop them out and got a huge amount of publicity. And, of course, Snow was a character, and he'd come out with a book every single Christmas, just about every year. And just before Christmas, he would be at Jordan Marsh, which was a department store, their book department. He'd be at Laureate's, which was a Boston bookstore. But he'd also in there trying to promote his books. But this was one way that he sort of was giving back to the community that he was writing about, because there were so many ghost stories and romance stories and crashes and ships sinking because of the lighthouses. He would want to do that. But I remember one time him coming in just before Christmas, and my father didn't normally buy new books. We're a used bookstore.
Right.
But what he did this time, he dedicated one of his books to my father in the book. So at Christmas time, we bought 100 copies of it, and we're then either giving it away to customers or selling them. And Snow was also a real character. One of the things I remember about him is he used to sign books. Sometimes in the signature, he'd put a little sea serpent. And one of the stories about Snow was he one time went in, and I remember him coming in the store and telling this. He had gone to a bookstore in Cape Cod. People at the bookstore, it was a new bookstore, didn't know him, didn't know anything about him, didn't know who he was. But he went up to the section where his books were, opened one up, and exclaimed out loud, "My, a rare, unsigned copy." And then he pulled out a pen and signed it. And then he introduced himself to the owner of the store. So books signed by Edward Rowe Snow, the rare ones are the ones not signed by him. But you know, one of the things, though, that we at the store did is when someone comes to us with a charity and so on, we like to help give back to the community that has helped us. And when Snow or someone like that comes, we always try to say yes. Another charitable thing that we did, there was a lady one time came into our store, And she read books to kids in Boston City Hospital, Children's Hospital, young kids who were really sick, and she had a volunteer job to read to them. And she came to us once and said, could we get some books? And we found some. And we wanted, when I give books and when my father gave books, we wouldn't give the old children's books that nobody wanted or would sell. We wanted to get her good books. And then about a month after that, there was a pediatrician who called who had started the program of volunteers at hospitals and said, we really need more books. And so we gave to that. And that organization, for about 5 or 6 years, we gave hundreds of children's books to them. It turned out it expanded so much beyond us that publishers started giving thousands of books to them. So we were one of the original starters of this Reach Out and Read program. But part of it was the tradition of Snow giving books to the lighthouse keepers, us being able to give books to read to young children. And, of course, I suppose you could say, well, it's to your benefit, because if you get kids interested in reading really young, they'll be lifelong readers.
It says a lot, too, about the gift of a book. I mean, I would be very, very embarrassed if anybody I knew threw a book away, because a book can be passed along and has value after someone's read it if they want to give it away.
Well, one of the things that we always do, though, when a charity does approach us, because we have outside tables at $1, $3, and $5, but it's almost like the system that another old Boston store did, Filene's Basement. After a couple of weeks, they'd go from $5 to $3 to $1. And I will almost never give the $1 books to a charity. We'll do something with them. But one of the reasons we don't like to give it to them, if we're going to give to a charity that really needs help in getting people reading, we want to give them books that people want and like, not our old rejects that we couldn't sell even at $1. So I try to really sort of supervise even the donation.
Is there an Edward Rowe Snow character out there these days that comes to visit you?
There is no Edward Rowe Snow character that you can imagine that could be Edward Rowe Snow because he was one of a kind. The other interesting thing about Snow is his books don't sell quite as well as they used to because people think that an author who's popular, that after he dies, everybody's going to be wanting to get everything because now they're not anymore. But an author like Edward Rowe Snow, who really, really worked at promoting himself, and I will say this one time came up that someone said, well, an author like John Grisham, we want to get his signed books and all that because if he gets old. And first of all, I don't like thinking about, when they die. You don't want to wait to your favorite author. But Grisham or King or so on, one of the reasons they stay so popular is they put a book out every year, year and a half, and it keeps them in the news, on the talk shows, on TV, on the radio,
right,
on podcasts. But if something happens, like in Edward Rowe Snow, that they die, he was in his 80s, so he lived a very good life. But once he stops coming out with new books, the promotion goes down, and slowly but surely there's another new author, another new book, and you start forgetting about the ones in the past. And one of the things, though, that Edward Rowe Snow, like I said, he was always doing books for charities. He loved reading. He was actually a history teacher in Winthrop, Massachusetts when he first got out of college. My mother-in-law had him as a teacher.
No kidding.
And she said it was about the only course in high school that she actually enjoyed because he could tell such great stories and bring the history out by storytelling rather than read this chapter, remember this date, and so on. So Snow was great, but he obviously also passed down this to his family. And I one time had to go out and look at some of his books that he had in his personal libraries. His daughter had called me in, and she was very nice, and we were recounting some stories about him coming in the store, she telling us about how much he enjoyed my father. But the idea of charitable giving really went on with her, because what she told me that I didn't first know, but her and her husband started a charitable event in Massachusetts called the Pan Mass Challenge.
Wow, that's one of the most popular and successful charities in the country.
Yeah, and the idea of the Pan Mass Challenge was you wrote a book from the Western Massachusetts.
Rode a bike.
No, well, maybe you could have a book with you. But see, I'm always thinking
You're
about
always thinking about books.
But you rode a bike from Western Massachusetts, right near the New York border, all the way to the tip of Cape Cod and Provincetown, and thousands and thousands of people each year. And then what you would do is you would get sponsors that, if you did this ride, you'd give $100 or $500 or $50. And we have 2 or 3 friends who do it almost every year, and we always give them $180. Which my wife points out, 18 is
high
and
sign of life.
Sign of life. And I just saw before I was recording this on the news that last year they gave $76 million, and it all went to cancer research. So Edward Rowe Snow loved giving books and things to people, and the lighthouses, and a lot of his was a charitable. We try to give away books many times for children to read, and then his daughter, although she's not doing it with books, carries on with probably giving away and managing an affair that gives millions and millions of dollars to cancer research that help people. Now, maybe some of the people, especially in the Children's Hospital at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, maybe some of them are getting benefits from the charity that his daughter did, and might also be there reading books that we've donated or other people have donated to the cancer wards.
It's a very nice stream of giving that you're describing.
When you do something that really helps people, that you enjoy, that it comes from the heart, not because someone says you have to write a check. Many times that's the most successful, and it's also the most heartwarming, and we just love it. And sometimes look back to the legacy of Edward Rowe Snow through being a friend of my father, I knowing him, then finding out his daughter did this, who is a wonderful person. It just, they were good people.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful legacy story, absolutely. And congratulations to you and to your team and your staff and your wife for thinking of others like that. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and especially with the season coming up, I'm not sure quite when this will come out, although we'll do everything to get it out before Christmas this year. It's just a fun story, and it just you can do things in different ways that help people a lot.
More than just a flying Santa, no question. Ken, thank you as always. God bless.
Thank you.